Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Programming in C++. This is the first interaction class today. So you have already covered quite a few modules. I'm sure things are going fine and you are doing your assignments all right. So this is to take you through some of the Uh, I'm sorry, that was just hold on. Okay, I'm back. I hope I'm audible now. So, welcome to this session where we will try to address a few queries that have been put up. So, I will first take queries that have come on the Google Sheet. You have put some queries. Certainly, I would always request you to put specific queries with examples if possible, because if you generically say explain this or speak on that, then I mean, this is not a lecture session. This is a doubt clearing session. So I cannot again repeat what is there in the lecture. So I have only picked up those which are relatively specific queries, but they are also often very generic. So the first question is, which is from Akash Kumar Singh. When a function returns a value to its to main, its scope of the value gets over there. Only when how the variable in main is able to get that value. So Akash, this has been discussed at length in terms of call by value and call by reference. A similar question also is there when you are copying value from the actual parameters from the calling function to the caller as to how does the value go. So there has been two mechanisms discussed. One is those values can be copied. So it is called call by value, or it could be in terms of call by reference, wherein the same address as in the calling function, as in the actual parameter, is shared as the address of the formal parameter. So similar thing happens in case of return also. So if before the function scope gets over, the return value is copied back to a variable in main. So that is the important thing. So there is a location separately for return value where that value is copied back, so that before the function is scope is lost, the copy back to the main happens. Or it could return by reference also, where some reference variable which is valid in the calling function, in that variable the return value will be put. So you should be very careful that if you use a local variable of the function and use that in return by reference, then certainly your behavior of the function may go wrong, because then whatever concern you have expressed will be valid, that the scope of the function is getting over, and uh, before main could actually use that value. So that will have to be, otherwise you are, if you are doing return by value, then certainly it is a different value which is copied into main. So everything would be okay. If you are doing return by reference, make sure that you are using a variable in the reference which is beyond the scope of the function. Let me move on. The next question is difference between reference and this has been dealt in depth in the lecture between the reference and the pointer. Pointer is an address variable where you can do address arithmetic, which keeps the address of another variable, which can be null. So many things have been discussed. And reference is just an alias. Internally, it will obviously keep an address, but it's not something which you can deal as an address. You cannot do arithmetic with reference. So whenever you refer the reference, it actually means the object only. So that's the basic difference. And certainly reference cannot be a null. It has to always have a value, and it cannot be changed either. It is set to something and will remain to be that. So I do not think this was a very smart question, because Shakshi, I'm sorry to say that, because this has been discussed well in the lecture, and you should repeat that lecture and do the corresponding problems that are discussed there. Okay, deep and shallow copy also is something which has been discussed. So this is in reference to pointers. So if you are pointing to an object and then you are copying the pointer, then there are two ways you can copy. One is you can just copy the pointer. So if you just copy the pointer, then there will be two copies of the pointer, both pointing to the same object. So that is what is called a shallow copy. So if you change the object with one pointer, the object will be changed, and through the other pointer also you'll be able to see that change. Deep copy is when you are pointing, you have a pointer, you are pointing to an object, and while copying, you not only copy the pointer, but you also make a copy of the object. So you have a new copy of the object, and you have a new pointer which points to that new copy of the object. So now these are independent copies. So now if you change the object through one pointer, naturally the other object will not be changed. The other pointer will still show you the old one. So that is called the deep copy. So that, I think this has been discussed in the lecture also pretty thoroughly. So that is the question you are again asking. Curly bracket initialization. Frankly, I did not understand this question much. Whenever you ask such question, please give an example, because it's from your description, it is completely, there is nothing called a curly bracket initialization in that way in the language. Of course, initializer lists in some cases are written with curly braces, but it is not clear as to what the question is. I think you can put some examples and put the question on the forum. We'll try to answer that on the forum again. Error message box, how to get the hint from the error message box which comes after compiling the code. See, this hint will have to come from the particular tool you are using. This is not a feature of the language, right? So if you are using GCC, you'll have to look at the GCC manual as to what that error message means. If you are using code block, you have to look at the code block manual. So if it says that the message prompt that the declaration terminated incorrectly and the point in the code line and so on, then if you are not understanding what that error is, you'll have to look up that manual, Shivang. So please look up that manual. And otherwise, if you have a specific question, then again, please write to us with an example. That just not English description, just write with a code snippet and see that this is what I got and this is what I'm not understanding. Then we'll be able to give you a better explanation. Learn C++. I'm quite familiar with Java. I know it well because I used it in my job. To learn C++ the same way, please advise me what should I do so I get a reason to code. You'll have to do a lot of projects. That's it. This is, the assignments that Zoeb, the assignments, you are right. Here the assignments are of fill up type, because this course is meant for those who are kind of doing the object-oriented programming for the first time as a first language. This is not particularly tuned for students who already know some similar language like Java well. So for you, my advice would be that so many different open source site. go to those sites, look up the problem challenges, take some competition code, and try to implement, say, a graphics editor, try to implement a text processor, try to implement a word processor, try to if you are more adventurous, try to write some systems code and so on, which C++ is really good, and then you'll be able to learn it well. Right. So please try those out, and I'm sure you'll benefit a lot by learning C++ well. And one of the objectives of this current course has been to focus you towards learning C++ with a better understanding, so that you not only learn the features of the language, but also you are able to understand what the language, why the language is designed in the way it is designed. Okay. Okay, so that were the kind of questions that came on the Google sheet. So now I move on to questions that we have commonly seen in the forum. So here it says, I cannot understand the code written after the point malloc free. Okay, oh, this part of the code, right? No, this is just showing you the object layout. This is talking about object layout on this. So it depends on this. Uh, so you have malloc an integer, size of an integer, which is in the pointer p, and this is where you have put a value, and you can see how that has been laid out. So to see how it is laid out, what I'm doing is I have actually taken a unsigned character star pointer. So unsigned character star pointer, an integer here is a 4-byte integer, so it takes 4 bytes. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking an unsigned character star pointer, so it takes 1 byte each, right? So it takes, so I traverse it by 1 byte. So I first do star q, so it reads whatever is at the beginning of that p. So now you can see that it actually has 2b here, which is at the end of it. So it first gives you 2b, and then I increment the pointer q plus plus. So it goes to the next byte, because this incrementation is based on the unsigned character. Mind you, this is not integer pointer. So then it would have skipped 4 bytes. This is an unsigned character, so it skips just 1 byte. So it skips over this byte 2b and goes to the next byte, which is 1a, and keeps on happening that way. So it shows that if I start with q, unsigned character, pointing at the same value as p, then I'm actually pointing here, and as I increment, I keep on going like this. So this shows the way the numbers are represented in x86. This is an x86 code. So this shows the little Indian way that you go from the lower bytes to the higher bytes. So that is what this is. This code is trying to represent. I think now this should be clear to you that what you are doing. Just match this 2b, 1a, 7e, and 8f, and q is incrementing 1 by 1. So as if there are 4 bytes written, and p actually is a lowest address byte, and from there you are incrementing, are going to higher address, higher address, higher address, and you are coming into from LSB, least significant byte, you are coming to the MSB, the most significant byte. Yeah. So that's what is going on. Here we have tried to explain that a little bit more in case you need to refer to. Okay, operator overloading. As I understand, operator overloading can be written as a member function. Yes, it can be written as a member function, but it has been discussed in depth in the lecture, Mrigank, that operator overloading can be written in 2 ways. One is it could be a member function, and it could be a global function also. Of course, if it's a global function, then often we will need that to be a friend function as well, because as an operator function, it has to access the internal, the private members of that. For example, if you're talking about a complex class, then it has data members like real and imaginary. So those data members will need to be accessed by the global function if I'm writing a global operator function to add. But if I'm writing a member function to add, then obviously I will not need that. So there are two possibilities. It could be a member function. If it is a member function, then apparently it will take one parameter. Why? Because being a member function, one of the implicit parameter is the object for which you will be invoking this member function. So every member function has a this pointer, which is the current object. So start this is the first operand, and what you write here is the second operand. So this is the member function style that you'll have. That's the reason you'll have only one parameter. But if you write it as a global function, then you'll have certainly two parameters. Those are the two operands because plus is a binary operator. So you'll have two parameters because the global function does not have a this pointer. So these are the two parameters. And now these are the two forms which are possible. So if we have this complex C1, C2, and then we do C3 is C1 plus C2, then if I have written like a member function, then I'll have C1 plus C2 means this is the first operand. So your operator plus is equivalent of the function operator plus, equivalent of the member function of operator plus. So this symbol, which is the infix notation, basically means this function, which is the prefix notation function. So this means C1 dot, the first operand dot operator plus. And then in the second operand goes in as which is C2. So this is what it actually means. As you said, how the function is invoked, this is exactly how the function gets invoked. It's just notational that this notation automatically gets converted in this form. So this is the notational convenience. Now, if it were the global function, so if it is a global function, then there is no member function in that, there is no implicit object. So it has only two parameters, C1 and C2. And so this is a global function. So this will now take, so this is now equivalent of saying operator plus C1, C2. So this will simply invoke in like this. So it depends on how you are doing this. Then based on that, then you will have the operator function or the member function or the global function. And I have discussed in the lecture that the global function has some advantages. For example, if you want automatic conversion of the first parameter, then that is not possible as a member function, but it is possible as a global function. You should look up the lecture again to see what those details are, but this is what. Now the last question is what you asked as well is what can be the return type. The return type is, of course, if you add two complex, you will have to decide what is the return type. Depends on the operator. Right? So if your operator is a plus, then your return type is a complex. So it has to be a complex. If your operator is say doing comparison of two complex numbers, saying whether they're equal or not, then your return type will have to be a Boolean. So it depends on what is your operator. Now, if it is a complex, say addition, then the result is a complex. Now the question is, what can the result be? Should it be complex or should it be complex reference? Now here I'll say that it has to be complex returned by value, not complex reference or returned by reference, because the addition of C1, C2, the object that is getting generated by adding C1 and C2 did not exist. Right? It's a new object because you're adding two objects. You're getting a new object. So if you're getting a new object by adding two objects, then naturally there is no object, there did not exist an object prior to this, which is C1 plus C2. So therefore, you cannot have a reference. A reference is always an alias of an existing object. So that existing object cannot be there because you are adding two complex numbers to get a new number. It has to be a new number, so it has to be returned by value. So it is very easy to reason out that in all such cases, it will be returned by value. But in some cases, it could be return by reference also. For example, you are doing, say, streaming operator. In the streaming operator, it will be written by reference because you take a stream and a value to put to that stream. Suppose you are doing an output stream. So you take O stream as a parameter and say a complex number as the value that you want to stream onto that. These are the two operands of that overloaded streaming operator. And what you expect in result? The return, you expect that the complex has been streamed onto the O stream and you want that O stream back. So in this case, the O stream is already existing. It is not a new object. It was existing. I've just added the complex onto it, added the new complex number. So in that case, in case of those, it will have to, so if I just, kind of stop the share here and just show you quickly as to what it looks like, it will be easy for you to see. Just for the purpose of illustration, let me just show you. Just give me a minute. Yeah, so just look at this. So I wrote another operator overloading as output streaming operator. So here I took the O stream, which is to which I want to actually output. I took a complex number and I'll write the code to output that the component wise and so on, put a bracket and all that. And then what I get back is a stream that I had taken because I have to keep streaming. So the stream that had input is what I will get back. So this is an existing object, the one that I had given. And that is the reason that I get this. I take this as a reference so that I do not want to make a new copy. And I return it also as a reference because it is that same output stream that I want to give back, which is not the case in case of adding two complex numbers. So that's the difference. So based on that situation, you'll have to decide what will be the return type and whether it is returned by value or it is returned by reference. There have been discussions on this in the lecture as well, but since you raised that question, Mrigang, thank you for raising it. I just discussed it in a little bit more detail. If we want to change the value of any variable, there's a reference variable to the, okay. So I have just constructed a code for that. So there's a variable m and I have a constant reference to it. What it means, a constant reference means it's an alias through which it a variable cannot be changed, as simple as that. So here, m and p both actually refer to the same variable. Now m, the variable itself is not a constant. So you can change that. It was initialized with 5. You can reassign it 8 to it. It gets a new value. So after that you print, it will print 8 and 8 because p is a reference to m. But if you want to change it by using p, that is, if you want to do p assigned 8, then you'll get an error. So that's the interesting thing. Is the reference is the constant, not the value, not the variable. The variable directly can be changed. The reference is the constant. So that is what we take as an advantage when we pass a parameter, an actual parameter, which is not a constant, as a constant formal parameter by reference. So what happens is inside the function, inside where the formal parameter is, that reference variable is a constant and therefore it cannot be changed. So through that, no changes happen. Whereas the original formal parameter, original actual parameter is changing. So that's a simple thing which is replicated in this case. So I think it is that is a basic purpose of a constant reference. Oh, difference between static and constant. I think you are a little bit confused. Just constant means that something whose value cannot be changed after initialization, no matter where it is. Static means that something which has to do with a lifetime. So something which is once created, like what is the contrast to static is automatic. That every time you call a function, the parameters and local variables of those functions are created, in the sense they're allocated on the stack, their values are given, computations happen, then the function terminates, they disappear. So that is what is the automatic. Static is you create it once at the beginning of the program, or if it is a local static in a function, then the first time you call the function, that is created, initialized. But then when the function scope goes out and you call the function again, the static is not reallocated. It continues to stay there as long as the program continues. So the static means the life cycle is static. It does not change with the call and return of the functions. Whereas constant means the value remains same. That is, the value cannot be changed after initialization. So these two are totally two different concepts. So a static can be a constant, a static can be non-constant, a constant can be static, a constant can be automatic, and so on and so forth, all possible combinations. Please understand that with this thought, please try to understand it. Okay, so this is kind of ranking of languages. This I've put here to answer some of the questions that follow after this. So this is the current, as of this month, the ranking of languages. And you can see that after quite some time, in the last couple of months, C actually has gained back #1 position, is ruling well over Java. So this TOB index is a popular index computed over lakhs of open source code that people are writing. So it shows that C has kind of a rating which is 16.95%. About 17% code is being written in C, which is positively changing, and Java somewhat goes down, followed by Python and C++ in the fourth place. So if you realize that C actually is subsumed in C++, so if you're an expert of C++, then you're an expert of C as well. So that means your expertise should be computed based on adding these two, 16 plus 6, 22, and these are almost 1 each. So about 24%. So the largest percentage of code that are being written now come under the skill set of C, C++. So which makes your motivation for being in this course really strong. So I have a broad question. I have hearing that very soon C++ will have, this is baseless. This is absolutely baseless. C++ is the fastest, is a language which is changing them, which is evolving the maximum. If you know that it was kind of staying at a point for a while till 2011 version started happening, and that made a lot of significant improvement in C++. Then a version happened in 2014, another in 2017, another recently about a month back in 2020. So there are a lot of improvements, all new things, strong things are being brought into C++. It's, as I showed by itself, it is the fourth most popular language, and with C, which it subsumes, this is the largest, about 25% code share in there. So it's completely baseless that any knowledge of C++ is going to go west, and C++ gives you a lot of knowledge in terms of in-depth in programming, in terms of systems understanding, and so on. So it's really a strong future if you know C++ well. Will there be questions of C as well? Well, if you ask me directly, no, because this is not a course on C. But can you think of a C which is not C++? Certainly not. So several of C++ questions are actually from concepts in C. So if you are learning C++, endear C as a child who needs to be inside. I'm an IT student. If I pass this examination and get certificate in subjects like, for example, Java, software engineering, can I get exemption? Well, it is so far as the ministry is concerned, you now have the credit transfer option available from the ministry's perspective, Ministry of Education perspective. but it is subject to what the academic body of your university that kind of manages your college decides. It is not a blanket one. So IITs, majority of IITs allow a significant amount of NPTEL credit to be transferred to the transcript. Several other universities are also allowing that, but I'm not sure if your university would specifically allow that. That you'll have to check with your university. If I need to learn C++, is it necessary that I should know all about including data structures of C? Uh, See, I mean, it's not necessary, but if you are uh, doing programming, then without understanding data structure, it is very difficult to do programming. And the other part of it is, of course, this course is somewhat limited in the sense that we have discussed significantly in terms of the C++ language and programming, but we have not discussed so much in terms of the C++ standard library. C++ comes with a very rich standard library. And in that, a major part of the standard library is what are called containers. Containers are different common data structure. Like if you have done data structuring in C, then certainly you have done stack, you have done queue, you have done hash table, you would have done DQ possibly, you have certainly done. So these kind of data structures, which are very common and very popularly required. If you're working in C, you need to write it for them. You need to write yourself these data structures for your program. In C++, these are available as library component. You have a stack component. You have a queue component. You have a very interesting vector component. Vector component is actually like an array. It works like an array, but it is interesting to the extent that unlike array, it does not necessarily have to be fixed in size from the creation time. You can at any time extend it, make it bigger, make it shorter, and so on. So you can resize the array, but it has exactly the same efficiency of what your array has, what your program defined, language defined array has. So these kind of containers, then you have hash table and you have hash map. There are at least 6, 7 very important containers, which are the most important fundamental data structure that you need in doing a large number of programs, and which is very commonly what you use in C. So I would say that it is not necessary to know all about these data structures, but it's certainly very helpful to understand them, and also in C++ to figure out that as you do the programming, how can you use the C++ standard library, like you use it for IOStream or for maths and so on. How can you use these container components, data structures, so that your programming becomes very standardized and very easy? Right? So that's an important factor. I'm sorry that we did not have enough time to have a lot of lecture discussions on this part of the standard library details and use models and so on. But this is what it actually is in terms of the ground realities. In terms of mobile app, yes, Swayam has some mobile app. You can make use of that. We have quiz and code assignments both in these courses. So the certificate criteria. The certificate criteria, I'm not sure if it has been published. If it has not been published, it will be published. Don't worry. There'll be a published criteria of how much of code assignments, how much of programming assignment, how much of your quiz test and all that will be used. So those will all will be published as a criteria, and that is exactly what will happen in the certification. Oh, I think that is all that I had, but I think I had on the chat, I had 2 questions. There was one question from Brigank Mukherjee. Sir, what is general memory management of a program? Why is free necessary after malloc? This is, see, free is necessary. See, what when you are doing memory management, you are one is the automatic management, which is happening with a function call. So function is called, the stack frame of the function is allocated on the stack, the function variables stay there, computations happen, function is done, that stack frame is deallocated, memory goes back, you are back to the same point. But when you are allowed to do dynamic memory management, what you are meaning here is dynamic memory management, where as a user you are doing the memory management, then you are using malloc. So you are using certain free store area of the memory to allocate your variables. So you are blocking some part of that memory. Now, if in this way, you keep on blocking that and you do not release them, because it is possible that you have blocked, say, 10 kilobyte, and you have done the computation with them and you do not need them anymore. You need fresh 20 kilobytes for doing some other computation. So unless there is a mechanism by which whatever you have blocked from the system is given back to the system, the memory will eventually run out. Nothing is infinite. Resources are not infinite. They're finite in nature. So free is necessary so that whatever you take from the system in terms of dynamically allocated memory can be, when their role is over, when their purpose is over, so that they can be given back to the system. So every malloc should have a free at the end, so that whenever you are done with the task, whenever you're done with the program, the amount of free memory that existed in the free store should remain exactly the same. You should not hold on to memory which you do not use, and others cannot make use of either. So free is necessary for that purpose. Anita Anil Kumar, sir, can you please explain negative indexing in array? I am afraid I did not really understand this question. You are asking that if I can use a negative index. So if I just use a negative index, then I'll have an error, because it goes beyond the error, beyond the array referencing area. But certainly there are examples where you have shown that you can swap between the arithmetic with the base and the index. You can write the index in place of the base, and you can write the base in place of the index, and so on. So those kind of tricks you can do. How references related to the same variable are managed and maintained? It depends on how many references you do to a variable, Shobhan. You can just do as many references as you want. And so if you have these references to the same variable, naturally, changing any one of them will mean changing that variable, and everyone else would, every other reference will also see that change. How does free know how many bytes to be deleted? This is a tricky question. Well, so what, how will it know? There's no way, right? So basically what, you'll have to have a scheme. There are multiple schemes that are possible. One scheme is where you maintain a table of what you have allocated. So every time you malloc, in that table, you put that address that you have malloc, and you put the size, the number of bytes that you have allocated at that address. So when free is invoked, you look up that table with that address and find what is that address and how many bytes were allocated, so you know how to remove that. That could be one way. The other scheme that often is used is where you write the size of the memory allocated in situ, in place. That is, suppose you have been asked to allocate 16 bytes. So you put 16 bytes, and you actually do not allocate 16 bytes. Actually, maybe you allocate 20 bytes. And in this 4 bytes on one side, you have the 16 bytes. On the other side, you have these 4 bytes where you write down this value 16. so that you know, you may not have 4 bytes, you may have 2 bytes also, you may have 1 byte also. It depends on what is the scheme. But the whole idea is you have the actual memory allocated on one side of the pointer, and the other side of the pointer, you write down how many bytes you have allocated. So if you follow that scheme, then when free goes to free, it knows that on this side, say on the lower address side, I have the actual allocation, and on the higher address side, I have a value, say written in 2 bytes, which tells me how many bytes are allocated. So I read, and so otherwise there is no magic to know that, because free, as you can see, takes a void star pointer. So free has no way of knowing how many bytes are allocated. And that is the reason when we talk about C++, we are talking about operator new and operator delete. And that is where this kind of an issue will be much easier to handle, because the operator delete will have to deal with those kind of destructors which are corresponding to that object, right? So operator delete is invoked on the object. So since it is invoked on the object, it's not only that I will know the destructor to call, which is the basic necessity, but since I know the destructor, I know the object, then I know the size. So I also know by default as to after destruction, how many bytes will have to be freed. So in case of C++, the management of the type through operator new and operator delete actually takes care of also the related size. But in C, it will have to be explicitly managed in the memory management scheme. Having said that, I would also like to tell you that this is not something absolute. It is not that this is the only scheme always everywhere used, but this is just a representative scheme. So there could be other schemes as well. Priya Pandit explained a little bit about function point. Function pointer is a function is an address. So function pointer is a location where the beginning address of the function is kept. It's just that. So pointer is an address variable. So if that address is that of a memory location, it is a variable pointer. And if it's the address of a starting of the function where for which you have a specific syntax to write, then it's a pointer to the function. So the advantage of having a function pointer is you can have a variable which is a function pointer, so that whenever you assign the function, if any specific function to that variable, function pointer variable, that function pointer behaves as if as a function. So by name, it is a common name, but by behavior, it could be different function. Is there any difference between new memory allocation and malloc? There's a huge lot of difference. Please read the slides and listen to that part of the topic. New is an operator in C++ which invokes the it does the allocation and invokes the constructor. Malloc has nothing to do with the constructor. Malloc is just an allocator. But new internally has a malloc or some kind of allocator, but importantly, it invokes the constructor. Similarly, delete invokes the destructor and then releases memory, whereas free just releases memory. So there's a lot of difference between the two. There are significant discussions given in the slides on this, so please follow those. Sir, I did understand what volatile does, but I did not understand why should it be used if value gets changed randomly whenever it is checked. Why it is needed? Because to model certain situations where it actually happens. For example, you are writing say a systems program to read a port of your laptop or your system. Now in that port, you are expecting to get a value. Now you do not know when you will get the value. So when you read it now, you get some value. But if you read it after 2 milliseconds or after 2 seconds or after 3 minutes, you might get a different value. So when you read that value and keep it there, what kind of a variable would you keep it? This is not something, the value that you read need not necessarily stay on because it can externally change. So to model such kind of situation, the volatile has been brought in. You can understand that it has very limited use. So it is not that it is significantly used everywhere, but it is brought in terms of some of the modeling of ports and so on. Okay, so I think that is all. Showman, is there any other question coming in the YouTube?
No, sir.
So that's all that we had on the YouTube chat.
Yes, sir, almost.
Okay. So then I think we have addressed all the queries. I think it was a interesting session to have with you. Not all questions I could answer in depth. Some were not so well formed. So I will request all of you to put those with examples to forum, and we will try to answer those in more detail. Do keep watching the videos repeatedly and going through the presentations, because a number of questions you asked are actually very well addressed, very well answered in the videos, in the presentation. So if you go through them well over again, you'll be able to understand them very well. So please try to do that, and wish you all the best with your progress with the course, with the assignments and so on. And towards the end of the course, we'll meet again for the live session, second live session, to clarify your ultimate, final doubts. Meanwhile, keep writing to us in the forum and keep raising any doubt, but always make sure that you write something with examples. Do not write very general things like explain this, explain that. Those have been done in the videos, those have been done in the lectures. Take specific examples and say, this is what I'm getting, this is what I don't understand, this example is not behaving the way you have explained. Then we'll try to answer that very specifically, and that can be helpful for your purpose. Okay. So it seems there's nothing else. So, Vibhangshu, should we then close the session?
Sir, please hold for 30 seconds, then we can close.
Okay.